Hello and welcome to your weekly roundup of all the latest news and ramble about the world of electric cars from the gang at electrifying.com. This week, we will be discussing the car tech that you can't live without, our charging heroes and the villains over Christmas, and we'll also take a look at some of the biggest news stories in the world of electric cars breaking this week. Welcome to the Kilowatt Half Hour. I'm Ginny.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Tom.
It's the first one of the new year, gang. And in true electrifying style, we're going to kick off with some moans, aren't we? Charging moans.
Well, heroes and villains, yes.
Heroes and villains. Should we start with that? Because it's, I'm guessing that we all did a fair bit of travelling the length and breadth of the country to visit various aunties and grannies and cousins over Christmas. Did you have any heroes or villains to report on the charging front, Mike?
Yeah, bit of both, really. I think heroes was, remember all that fuss just before Christmas? There was, don't travel, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be, when you're in your electric car, it's going to don't even think about it. Well, I travelled day before Christmas Eve up to Melksham to pick up my stepdaughter, and we stopped at a Costa there, and there's a Fastned station there, six units, lovely, one big yellow canopy, not far from the M4 A303. I saw two cars there for the hour that I was there. There was, people drove in, charged up, went off. There was just no, I mean, I'm sure there'll be people who say it was busy everywhere, but anecdotally, I found that most people said it was absolutely fine for charging. That's my hero. And my villain was my Pod Point home charger has decided its New Year's resolution is to not work anymore. So it's, it works, but it's kind of gone rogue. It charges all the time now. So I plugged in my Ioniq 5 when it was empty, and normally the program on the Pod Point that tells it to charge at midnight and 4 a.m. for my Octopus Go, and I just got a ping halfway through the afternoon say your car's full, and I thought, oh no, I've got 40p kilowatt hour. Charged up 70 kilowatt battery. So,
that's
not good. So it's really, instead of being like, a £5 or £6 to fill up, it's probably going to be the thick end of 20 quid. So I was really annoyed about that. And at first I thought it was user error. So I tried it again the next time. And of course, the same thing happened. I was only doing a bit of research, found out that, it's sort of lost its connection and won't reconnect. So that's, I don't know what to do, whether to sort of stick with it or pony up for a new one and just, get it all working again. But yeah, so those are my heroes and villains over Christmas.
Well, I will. I'll come back on that one with you, because I did replace my charging unit last year. So I've had a ChargeMaster. It still had ChargeMaster on it from the very early days. Honestly, really retro. Big lump of plastic. Never failed me once.
Yeah,
it was just like, honestly, I never had an issue with it. Just did what it said on the tin. And then last year I swapped it out for a Zappi, which I generally have been happy with, apart from actually it seems way too complicated, and the technology, you've really got to, it's not massively intuitive is my big point on that. But actually it has tripped out quite a lot. So twice over Christmas, I woke up to a car that hadn't charged because the charger had completely tripped out, which never happened once with the ChargeMaster. So yeah, I mean, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it and don't change it would be my advice to you, Mike. So that was my villain, actually, because I didn't really go anywhere at Christmas. For the first Christmas in years, I didn't really travel. I let family come to me, which was nice. They came to us. But I did have a really good charging experience before Christmas when I was up in Manchester at the Trafford Centre, where they've got all those banks of unlocked Tesla chargers. And I do still think if you can find those, they are absolutely brilliant, because they always work and they're fast and you can usually get on them. So come on, Tesla, if you're going to do one thing for us in 2024, open up the rest and put some more in, because you quite clearly really do know how to run a charging network. So that would be my villain and my hero. Tom, what about you?
I think, Mike, we both got the villain in the BP points that are in the what's the centre called? Is it a Westfield in White City?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's awful, God. Isn't it? Yeah.
So you go underground, and first of all, you can't get any phone reception to look at the website because you're underground, and they don't even work with a card. So there's these 12 bays.
Yeah.
And before Christmas, every other space was taken. You had to queue for them. You were fighting and elbowing your way to get to spaces. And there's these empty 12 bays. People hadn't iced them, which is a good thing, but none of them worked. So infuriating when you need to charge. But the hero for me is that, and it's becoming more normal for me. My wife Lisa said, "Oh, let's go to the seaside." So Southend, the car didn't really have enough charge. I thought I'm going to have to charge when we get there on the way back. So you just look on a map, and there's a charge point in one of the car parks. You go there. There's 4 bays. 2 of them are taken, plug in, and it works. And you just think this is how it should be all the time.
I think generally, the thing I have noticed is that charging has got better. Now that immediately means that you were all going to start tapping on your keyboard and sending us comments that no, it was a nightmare here and it was a nightmare there. And I do, admit that there still are lots of places where we need to do more, but I do think it is getting better out there. Yes, no?
Yeah.
Agreed?
Yeah, I remember the first days of having a Leaf, and when there was one point here or there, and you knew you couldn't get home because it was a Leaf and it only had 80 miles range or something. And in comparison to now, when cars have got a longer range, so you can always go somewhere else in an emergency. But it seems to me to be better. I don't panic about doing those long journeys anymore because I know that either I'll be able to charge at my destination or I'll be able to charge on the way home. And I don't have range anxiety anymore.
Good. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we discussed the other day, and it comes up in the postbag a bit later. Really, it's charger anxiety now, isn't it? You're just thinking, well, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. I'm aiming for this place that's got. I mean, it's interesting when we're doing the sort of filtering on ZapMap to sort of try and find somewhere. Now, it used to be a bonus if there was like more than 2 at a charging station, and now I kind of filter for 4 or more charges because you. But even then, you're kind of still getting stuff that's really busy. But yeah, I guess it's peak times as well, isn't it? People is trying to work out the point at which most people are going to be charging. But yeah, I don't have it.
I think the biggest challenge, and I know there was some news that came out, I think it might have been right at the start of the year, last week maybe, or maybe over Christmas, which was something that the RAC had done where we just still aren't meeting targets for rapid charges on motorways. And I would agree with that. And I don't know about you guys, but I do a fair bit of motorway driving, and I tend to always come off the motorway if, I will avoid charging at the services unless I know it's, say, the grid serve chargers at Rugby. But even they were a little bit hit and miss at one point last year. But I think one of the big challenges for charge point operators is getting the actual chargers in. So I talk to a lot of them regularly, and they'll say it's still issues with planning, with the fact they don't own the land. So we do quite clearly have a long way to go. But I mean, you've got to really look at people like GridServe and send hats off to them for what they've done. They took the electric highway, which was on its knees, and they are definitely making quite a big difference with that, aren't they?
Yeah, the only time I've ever had to queue at a motorway service station is when I had a Tesla, and it was South Mims, and I had to wait, I don't know, 5-10 minutes maybe. But there's an announcement today that there are going to be 36 Tesla chargers at South Mims and Hopwood. I don't even know where Hopwood is, but 36 chargers. I mean, that's getting pretty serious, isn't it?
Hopwood is in Manchester, near Rochdale, unless there's another
Yeah.
Hopwood. So please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that because my parents do some volunteering at a place called Hopwood Hall. Might not be the same Hopwood, but I hope it is, because there's a desperate need for chargers up there in North Manchester.
I mean, 36. I mean, we thought at Rugby the total of 24 and 12 Tesla and 12 GridServe was impressive, but 36 just Tesla.
They don't really have any up there, Tom. Honestly, charging still up in North Manchester is really bad. And if anyone listening does live in North Manchester, please, if you could drop me a line to let me know where I can charge other than on the unlocked Teslas at the Trafford Centre, that would be much appreciated, because I do struggle a lot with charging when I get up there.
May I make a quick public service announcement?
You may.
Or a request, rather. If there's anyone else got an Ioniq 5 or an EV6 and has been able to get a Tesla V3 charger, which is the quicker ones, not the brand new V4 ones, but the slightly quicker ones that are in most of the publicly open sites. If you've got those to work with your car, can you let me know? Because I know early on there was a problem with those cars not working with the 800-volt system that Hyundai and Kia have. So I'd be interested to know. So please let me know in the comments below if you've been able to get one to work.
Over to you, dear listener. And you can also email us as well. If you do want to email us, you can email us at info at electrifying.com. So if you don't feel, if you're listening to this as a traditional podcast and not on YouTube, then do feel free to drop us a line. We always love hearing from you, and we'll be doing Postman Mike's Postbag. That's it, isn't it? We'll be doing that at the end of the podcast as well, because we've had some good ones in. I want to talk now about technology on cars that I don't know if we need. So I'm running a BMW i5, which is pretty good all round. I think it was one of the winners actually in our electrifying awards last year. And of course, it is packed with technology. Not least, it has the ability to take selfies of you, which I haven't actually
Useful.
used
Can't believe
yet. No, but I'm sure the kids will find it fun. But what is probably slightly more useful is that it has got a parking assistant. So this is quite a clever one. It recognises spaces. You can ask it to find you a parking space. It will park automatically, whether that's perpendicular or parallel parking, and it will also drive out of the parking space for you. And of course, I've used this technology before, but I haven't had it in a car that I've had for a long period of time to this degree. And I used it again for the first time before Christmas. And it honestly, my heart was in my mouth. It goes into the parking space a little bit faster than I would dare to do. It's made me realise that I'm a steady, cautious parker. And honestly, the first time, my hands were hovering over the steering wheel, just wanting to take back control. I've used it a lot more since then, and I've got used to it, actually. And I do think I think it's useful there's an awful car park in Reading at the station that I use a lot, and it's a horrible car park, and the spaces are really narrow. It's kind of useful in there. But I kind of think that if you have a car that has got that technology, you really should be able to just park yourself. So I don't know, is it something that people use? Or like me, are you such a backseat driver that actually you're hovering over the steering wheel and your foot's on the brake, just waiting to dive in?
So
And the interesting thing is my son, who's 14, who is obviously, really into technology, he can't stand it. He
Really?
literally is, please don't put that on, please. Finds it completely freaky, and it literally terrifies him. So I don't know, it's interesting. I'm using it quite regularly, and I'm a lot more relaxed with it now after having used it for sort of maybe 6 weeks or so. But I don't know. What do you reckon out there, dear listeners? Do you use that? I mean, yeah, Tom, Mike, what do you reckon?
What's the process for the BMW one? Because I remember the first ones, and I think I had a Qashqai with it 10 years ago. And
yeah, it's not new,
you
is
still
it?
had to press the throttle, but the process of it was that you had to go past a space, press the button, it would recognise, and by the time there's then 6 cars queuing up beeping at you, and you just give up. But I think the BMW is a bit more automated, isn't it? Do you have to press any throttle?
It will find the parking space if you tell it. No, you don't get involved at all. So this is coming back to this whole thing about self-driving technology. And I spent quite a lot of time last year in a Mustang Mach-E with the hands-off tech on the motorway, which again completely freaky the first time you do it. No, you don't do anything. So it's very clever. So you just it will say, do you want to enable park assist? And you just press the little button on the screen, and it does the whole thing for you, and it will show you the space that it's identified. So it's a very, very clever system, and I don't doubt that it's probably a far better driver than I am. But it's just interesting. The steering is still feels a bit jerky, just the way it does I've been a passenger in quite a few self-driving cars when that technology has been trialled here in the UK. And that's the weirdest thing, is the way the steering wheel feels jerky, and it all just feels a bit automated, because of course it is. But it's a very clever system, and I am using it a lot more now, and it is quite useful. But it's that first feeling of, I don't like this. And also the feeling that passengers have. My mum also was here over Christmas, and she was like, please don't use that. I just don't like it. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have technology, dear listeners, on your car that you don't use? We've kind of touched on this before, but I think this could be really useful tech. But I think you just have to get used to it. I don't know. Any interesting tech on your car, Tom?
Well, first of all, on the automatic parking thing, I normally ignore them because I just can't be bothered. But I tried it on the Toyota BZ4X I've got, because I was at Stansted Airport and there was a perfect spot. There was no one around, and I thought, I'll try this technology, see if it's improved. So I pressed the button, and it said, "Your cameras are too dirty. Get out and clean them." For God's sake. Okay, I give up. It's just easier to park myself. But no, I think for cameras, the big thing for me is that we're all going towards cameras all the time, and the Nissan Ariya that I've been running has one of those, the rear view camera, the one on your windscreen. You can have that as a mirror, or you can have it as a camera. And there's only once when I've used the camera, and that's when it was like loaded to the gunnels and I couldn't actually see out the back, because otherwise it's just a really strange, it's in 2 dimensions, so you don't get the
It is.
distance you are to other cars, and you have an odd thing where you're focusing on the windscreen and then you're focusing on something which is nearer to you, and it just takes a fraction of a second, but it just doesn't feel natural. It's better than having no rear vision at all, but I would always choose to have the mirror because it's in 3D, if I could do. And those where you have on like the Honda E or the Audi e-tron, where you have the door mirrors are cameras. I think it saves you
Yeah.
something like 2 miles on the range, but means you can't see when it's raining or at night.
It was interesting, wasn't it, a couple of weeks ago, Mike, on the pod, like towards the end of last year, when Nicola was saying that she actually
Mm,
likes the cameras on the Honda E. It's the
mm,
only car she likes those digital cameras. Personally, I'm
Yeah.
a bit like you. I'm not a massive fan. I'd rather have park assist than digital cameras when it
yeah,
comes
I
to
mean,
tech.
cameras they're great when you're reversing, and if I now
Hmm.
get in a car that doesn't have a reversing camera, I think there was a Citroen which didn't have it, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to have to actually look where I'm going. Then they're brilliant, but for those sort of common things while you're driving, no, I'd rather have a proper old fashioned bit of glass.
Cue all the comments quite rightly about spoilt journalists who only get to drive
Yeah,
cars that are fitted with cameras. And also CarPlay, Apple CarPlay. We talk about that like every car in the world's got it, which of course it doesn't have. But it is worth pointing out that a lot of the cars that we get sent to test, they are always specced up to the nines, aren't they, Mike?
Yeah, they
They got
are.
all the
Yeah,
gadgets.
yeah, yeah, they are. Speaking of gadgets, I mean, I'll give you one that I use and one that I don't use on Ioniq 5. I'm surprised to find myself. I do use the vehicle to load thing a fair bit.
Mm.
I powered my Christmas lights off them, outside Christmas lights off the car, but I had to sort of
What a
rig up.
brilliant idea.
But I
Why
had to
didn't I
rig.
think of that?
I
That's
know you should have done
amazing.
that. I had to rig up some sort of daft
Oh,
umbilical cord for when I drove the car away. Obviously, I didn't want my inflatables and the lights to go out, so I had to sort of have a sort of secondary kind of thing under the car so it didn't get wet. So it was more complicated. I'm not sure I'll do it again next year for the 40p I might have saved by doing it. But the other thing about my car came with those relaxation seats. Remember those ones that kind of in the Ioniq 5 that kind of go
yeah,
all the
yeah,
way
yeah,
back and
yeah.
with the little sort of
They go
ottoman that
right back, don't they?
they do. And I there's never been a point where I felt like using those, because they're supposed to do it when you're charging up. It's supposed to relax you when you charge up. But I don't. I mean, I do something. I do some work, or I eat my McDonald's or something like that. I've never really found a point where I need to be sort of lying prone. So I might fall asleep and then wake up 3 hours
Mm.
later at a charger still. But yeah, so I've never used those. I kind of regret ticking the options box for those. But the vehicle to load thing I've used quite a bit. But Tom, going back to your point about the parking in public car park, in that Westfield one that we both parked in before Christmas, it was an underground car park, 312 spaces or something, and the sign said there were 6 available. Now, what I'd really want is the car to know where those 6 are, because you and I drove up and down, up and
mm,
down, up and down every row to find. I mean, we eventually found them, but it took about 20 minutes and 3 laps, didn't it, to find it? It was one of those places that didn't have the lights,
mm.
the little green lights or anything. So it's yeah. So that would be and park it
Yeah,
in there. That would be the perfect
it
system. I
would.
would use that all the time.
I would say that in Westfield, London, they should perhaps aim just for actually getting the chargers to work first. That might
And that
be
would be
useful.
nice. That'd be
Anyway,
nice.
on the topic of chargers, I'm going to rattle through some news stories
Mm.
now, because there's been a great news story that came out this week, which is this one. It's over on the website, electrifying.com, which is about BT turning those green cabinets that you see dotted around the place into chargers, which I thought was such a cool idea. So there are apparently 60,000 of them around the UK, and they're traditionally used to store all the cabling for broadband and telephone cabling. And how it works is it's a pilot scheme. They're going to retrofit the cabinets to provide charge points. And if there's existing broadband cabling in there, then they can do that without the need for additional power connections, which is great. And it means that chargers can be fitted in those cabinets that are still being used, and also the ones that perhaps have been, put out of service. It gives them, a second life, which is brilliant. I think the thing that really stood out for me, though, on this story was this one line where it said they're working really closely with local councils in Scotland and more widely across the UK. And it's just like, here we go again. It's actually Scotland that has another brilliant electric
Mm,
vehicle initiative. Scotland have really got it together when it comes to electric cars, haven't they? Don't you think?
yeah.
Yeah, I think they have with everything, haven't they? I mean, there's the grants. There's the grants that you can get in Scotland. There's it's not just electric cars; it's solar panels. And one of our contributors, Jess Cross, has all sorts of setups that he's done using the grants that he can get from the Scottish government. As a result, he's got 2 electric cars and loves them, and fuels them very cheaply. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm quite jealous.
Yeah, it was just that. That was the line. Closely with Scotland, more widely across the UK. That means we're not going to get too many of them. And hats off to you in Scotland again. You know, just if you're not driving an electric car, you live in Scotland, you really should be, because there's some great infrastructure up there. So, Mike, any news stories caught your eye this week?
Well, as we reported, electric car sales are sort of, I hate to use the word flatlining, but they're not growing perhaps at quite the rate they were, and certainly the
No.
private sort of purchases are taking quite a hit. So there's been a call for VAT to be addressed on electric cars. So there's a call for it to be halved. I mean, sort of just putting it out to the room, really. Do we think we need more incentives? I mean, if you look around Europe, France still has a 5,000 and a 7,000 euro incentives for electric car purchase, and a lot of other countries in Europe still do. And we turned ours off pretty quickly
Yeah,
because there was a feeling
we
that
did.
perhaps
It's
the
interesting.
system was being gamed. But yeah, do we need incentives to get people into electric cars still?
I think when you look at those stats, I think whether the VAT reduction is the right thing, you know, how long have we been calling for a VAT reduction on
Mm,
public charging, which
yeah,
again needs to happen,
which needs
and
to
you
make
know
more sense.
they don't seem too keen to give up on their the money they make from VAT, do they? But I think when you look at those stats, and like you say, it's not a massive drop, but it's definitely a flat line. And I think there's the
Mm,
one that really stood out for me was that only 1 in 11 electric cars sold now are going to private buyers,
mm,
which is quite a shocking figure. So I think I would argue that yes, but then you do come back to that thing with why should we be subsidizing people to go
yeah.
into, you know, nice sort of 50, 60, 70,000 pound electric cars. So I think I would want to see it down at the lower end of the market. And actually we talk so much about new cars. I would like to see it on used cars. And we've just
Mm,
been talking about Scotland, and I think you just mentioned it, Tom. In Scotland, they have that brilliant thing, which is the EV loan scheme, which is run by the Energy Saving Trust in Scotland. And that's available it's an interest free loan of up to £30,000 for an
Mm.
electric car or van, up to £5,000 for an electric motorbike or a moped. And just schemes like that, I think, are brilliant, because I think we will have a lot more used stock coming onto the market now, and it would be great that, you know, they are still relatively more expensive, and it would be great to get people in. But yeah, I think I would be a yes for that, but I would caveat that with it needs to perhaps be, you know, only on cars up to a certain level. I don't know. What do you reckon, Tom?
Well, I think you're right. If you incentivize used cars or make used cars more attractive, then you improve the retained value that those cars have, which makes the finance on new cars cheaper. So that seems to me to be a win-win. I mean, the industry saying cut VAT. I think that they've previously been shown to, if there's a tax cut, they just kind of nick it, don't they? You know, when there was the
Mhm.
grant, and then
yeah.
suddenly the grant got cut, or the manufacturers suddenly found they had a lot more profit margin than they thought they did. So I think if you can incentivize people to buy electric cars, whether they're new or used in whatever way, and maybe it's the infrastructure. I mean, people are still
Mhm.
saying, "I'm not going to get an electric car until I know I can get to my grand's at Christmas." So it's I don't know. I think if you can incentivize other things rather than just taking money off.
I don't actually think it is infrastructure that's putting people off. I think it's price. So we did that big piece
Mm,
of work last year where we spoke to like over 11,000 drivers around the UK, and a lot of them, the vast majority, were non-electric car owners. You ask them what the biggest barrier to entry is, and it's price. And they are still expensive. You know, we talk about cars that are under £30,000 as if they're like affordable, and they're not. You know, that's if you're looking to get into a car, you know, fairly cheap new car, and you want a petrol car, you've got a lot more choice than that. I think the last time we looked, there were over 100 options if you were looking at a cheaper petrol and diesel, and like a handful for electric. And I guess that leads us into the next news story that I was going to bring up, which is MX-30. Because that's at a price cut, hasn't it, Tom?
Yeah, so MX-30 has been one of the cars that started off being below £30,000, and then it went above £30,000, and now finally it's gone below 30 grand again. So it's one of the cheaper cars out there. So it's now competitive with things like a Leaf or the Mini's got above 30,000 now, hasn't it? So those cars that are below 30 grand, it's now one of them. Now, the strange thing with MX-30s, I've never liked them really, and I've never seen the point of them. But you do sometimes, when you're talking to people about electric cars, and I say, "What do you need?" and they say, "I want a car that's around £30,000 or this much per month, and I need 5 seats, and it needs to be able to get the family in it, and I quite like being sat up high, and I don't do that many miles." You suddenly find yourself recommending an MX-30, which it's something that I never expected to do, because the range is so small and it's slow to charge, and I don't know, it's just a bit strange really, isn't it? But I can see it's got a place, and now it's below 30 grand, it's even more of a place, I suppose.
It's definitely more palatable, isn't it? I ran one for a while. I don't know if you remember. This was right at the sort of in the early days when we first launched electrifying. And it was that. I mean, in winter, oh my goodness me, it's just a joke, you know. But if you are one of those people who does fairly fixed mileage every day, and you know you're charging up at home on your off-peak tariff, then all those sort of quibbles with it, they're not going to bother you too much. And the thing that really struck me about that car from having it was how big it was in the back. So I had rowers staying with us during the period that we had it, and rowers are tall. And I had 4 6-foot 4, 5 rowers in that car, 3 in the back, 1 in the front as passengers one day, and they were like, "Oh, this is good. This is big." I mean, it's a good practical car. I don't know. Does it make it more palatable to you, Mike? Now it's dropped under that 30k mark.
No, I don't think it
No.
does. I think I think you look on the used market, and
MX-30.
you know, I know, bless it. Listen, I love stuff that's different, and I love those kind of rear suicide doors because my i3 has them, and I think it's a nice piece of it. It's got that cork in the interior and everything. It's clearly add a bit of. It's a nice thing, but would I spend my own money on it?
It's been thought about.
It has. No, I wouldn't. I think if you're looking at sort of just under 30 grand, and you're looking at. And you want to get something. There's a ton of stuff on the used market, nearly new, year old, that would I would say be infinitely more practical on it. But if you like it, and it's a car you would buy with your heart, I think, not your head, then fair play. There's no wrong decisions if you like it.
Right. Well, then, poor MX-30. It's not the most loved car that we've had through the electrifying towers doors, is it?
No, well, I think I fell out of love with it in the first instance because I stopped at Beaconsfield Services because it needed a charge and plugged it into the high power chargers, and it had like 5% charge left, and it was taking 9 kilowatts. The maximum it would take was 9 kilowatts on an Ionity 350 kilowatt charger.
And we had loads of problems with the 12 volt battery on it, didn't we? From memory, I think as well. I think we're all succumbed to 12 volt issues at one point or another. Yeah. Anyway, so we are only a couple of minutes left on this episode of the Kilowatt Half Hour. Should we do Postman Mike's Postbag? Da, 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 da. I'm not going to do the song.
Oh,
I'll wait until Nicholas is back to do that.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to do it?
No.
Postman Mike, Postman Mike, Postman Mike on his electric bike.
So there's no right. In case there's any listeners left. Postbag, good postbag this week. Thank you very much. If you were listening to it on a podcast app and you're wondering what we're talking about, these are the comments that are below our YouTube version of this podcast. So if you've got a point, if you think we're talking out of our backsides or agree or disagree with anything we said, please leave your comments there. Right, this postbag on the subject of charging at someone's house, which we brought up in the one we did just before Christmas. Zan Manning says he stayed at a wonderful Airbnb October, November. They offered the use of their Zappy charger and invoiced at a rate of the cost plus 5p per kilowatt hour, which seems perfectly reasonable. He was happy with it. And
Yeah,
then he had a fully charged car
love
and everything.
that.
I think that seems to be the way to go, Airbnb hosts. Dad JV says he's just been told by someone who has a holiday cottage that it's illegal to allow anyone to plug into a 13 amp socket to charge the car at their cottage. He said he can't find anything referring to this. There's a reason for that because it isn't. Is anyone any wiser? I don't think it's illegal. I would say that it's probably the owner saying it's illegal because it would put people off doing it. If the owner says, I'd rather you didn't charge your electric car off the 13 amp socket, he probably would.
Yeah.
But if you say it's illegal, it adds another level of peril into it, doesn't it? I mean, I must admit the words cottage and 13 amp socket do slightly scare me because the chances are it does sound like a rather old property. And as we know, wiring in certainly a plug that's reached the outside or close to the outside of your property is usually on a spur off a spur, a very old system. So you need to make sure it's incredibly trustworthy before you sort of stuck your car onto charge for that. But I don't think it's illegal. Jude Brown says she doesn't have any off-street parking, but she's hoping that there'll be an AC charger in a parking area. She's got a local Green councillor who's said to ask, so she's been told to keep prodding the council in the next year. So we'd advise that would keep going because a lot of councils do have budget for this sort of thing.
Well, this is the thing that we've done a lot of research into this, and there is this huge pot of money that the government has set aside that councils can tap into to get parking on street parking and also in public places. And it's not being tapped into. Some councils are great, some councils are not. So just really be aware that if you're looking and thinking, it'd be great to get some charges there, actually the money is there and councils are supposed to be accessing that money. So I would be persistent with that. If you've got a local paper, write to your local paper. Just make yourself a bit of a pain because they need to do this. Yeah. That's my rant over for today.
Absolutely. Sorry. On the subject of ranger and charge anxiety, which came up whether one exists and the other one doesn't. Patrick H. Slightly angrily said that you asked for comments, but I never read his out. So anyway, so here goes.
Oh, Patrick. Sorry, Patrick.
He bought an electric car 5 years ago, and public charging was free, generally free. I remember those heady days. He said he's never gone to the seaside because the two resorts that have free charging, the chargers are in supermarkets, and he's not prepared to wait 4 hours and get a ticket for overstaying in the car. So he's never public charged, but he's seen reviews that suggest you need lots of strange cards, and we can't even standardize the plugs. Patrick, I would suggest maybe firstly have a look at our charging away from home section on the electrifying.com website. And I think, possibly that is a slightly, I'm not saying it was perfect ever. And I think certainly there was a case when there were lots of apps and cards and things and you couldn't use contactless. But I'd urge you, Patrick, perhaps you have a go out there and have a look and see, because vast majority of chargers take contactless cards now, and we're really down to CCS and CHAdeMO in terms of connectors, and it's mostly CCS now. So Patrick, I would perhaps give it another go, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. But I think the days of free stuff might be over. I don't want to shoot the fox here, but I think it will be.
I know one place that I go to regularly that is a shopping centre where it's still free, but I'm not telling anyone in case they want to. It's Oxford, not the Westford. There's a shopping centre in Oxford, centre of Oxford. It's so good, loads of them, and it's free.
Okay, well, you can put it in the comments. We put it in the description below, Ginny, if you're feeling like it. And a couple of people who've done long trips. Andrew Clayton said he also has range anxiety. He has charge anxiety rather than range anxiety, but he says things are definitely improving. He's just done a 500-mile journey, no issues, no broken charges, no queues, and he did it in a Corsa E. So he said, like its owner, has a limited range, which I thought was a quite nice comment. And Paul Willits says he's got a Citroen e-Dispatch, again, not blessed with an enormous range, Devon to York on an August weekend. He says there's still too many 50 kilowatt chargers on the network, which, I slightly agree with. We moan there is not enough. And then I don't know what you're like, but I tend to skip past them and try and look for something with a bit more power.
I don't bother with them.
Yeah.
I think he said, Paul Willett, I've just seen there on that one, he's got range anxiety on the M1 as he bounced from services to services,
that's a good phrase.
I avoid the services.
Go on, just as a quick suggestion, convert the 50 kilowatts to CHAdeMO, because CHAdeMO can't take more than 50 kilowatts anyway. So just have those as the CHAdeMO ones and leave the other ones for everyone else.
Controversial
do
decision.
Do we really even need CHAdeMO?
Yeah, because there's
Yeah, my dad
thousands and
does. He's got a
thousands of
Leaf.
Nissan Leaf owners who still have CHAdeMO.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good for all the Leaf owners out there. Not much use
Yes.
for everybody else.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
on that note, I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap up the postbag because we've gone way over
Sorry.
our kilowatt half hour. So we are officially the kilowatt half hour and a bit for our first podcast of the new year. Thanks for all your comments. We'll make sure we leave more time for them next week, I think is the lesson that we've learned from this one.
Yep.
But it's great to be back with you. And we've got loads of good stuff coming this year. So should we say our goodbyes? Goodbye and join us next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.